What's up, Ice and Fire fans? Welcome back to the House of Vine podcast and the final part in my Melisandre P.O.V. breakdown. In my last video, we reviewed Melisandre's interactions with Devon Seaworth, her opinion of both Lord Davos and the soldiers Stannis left behind at Castle Black, and ended with her talking to the wildling Rattleshirt about the Grey Girl and the Dying Horse, who she believes to be Jon Snow's sister, Arya Stark. When we left off in part 3, Melisandre and the wildling's conversation had been cut short due to the sounding of the Night's Watch war horn. Let's head to Mel's chapter and see what follows this ominous alert.
He broke off at the sound of a war horn and rose swiftly to his feet. All over Castle Black, Melisandre knew the same sudden hush had fallen, and every man and boy turned toward the wall, listening, waiting. One long blast of the horn meant rangers returning. But two... The day has come, the Red Priestess thought. Lord Snow will have to listen to me now. After the long mournful cry of the horn had faded away, the wildling finally broke the spell. Only one then? Rangers? Dead rangers. Melisandre rose to her feet as well. Go put on your bones and wait. I will return. I shall go with you. Do not be foolish. Once they find what they will find, the sight of any wildling will inflame them. Stay here until their blood has time to cool. Outside, a light snow had begun to fall. A crowd of crows had gathered around the gate by the time Melisandre and her escort arrived, but they made way for the Red Priestess. The Lord Commander had preceded her through the ice, accompanied by Bowen Marsh and 20 spearmen. The guards on the gate were not Queen's men, but they passed her all the same. It was cold and dark beneath the ice, in the narrow tunnel that crooked and slithered through the wall. Jon Snow and his black brothers were gathered around 3 spears, some 20 yards away. The spears were 8 feet long and made of ash. At the top of each was impaled a severed head. Their beards were full of ice, and the falling snow had given them white hoods. Where their eyes had been, only empty sockets remained, black and bloody holes that stared down in silent accusation. Who were they? Melisandre asked the crows. Blackjack Bulwer, Harry Hal, and Garth Greyfeather, Bowen Marsh said solemnly. The ground is half frozen. It must have taken the wildlings half the night to drive the spear so deep. They could still be close, watching us. Could be 100 of them out there, said the black brother with the dour face. Could be 1,000. No, said Jon Snow. They left their gifts in the black of night. They ran. His huge white direwolf prowled around the shaft, sniffing, then lifted his leg and pissed on the spear that held the head of Blackjack Bulwer. Ghosts would have their scent if they were still out there. I hope the Weeper burned the bodies, said the dour men, the one called Dolor's Head. Elsewise, they might come looking for their heads. Jon Snow grasped the spear that bore Garth Greyfeather's head and wrenched it violently from the ground. Pull down the other 2, he commanded, and 4 of the crows hurried to obey. Take the heads and burn them. Leave nothing but bare bone. Only then did he seem to notice Melisandre. My lady, walk with me, if you would. At last. If it please the Lord Commander.
If you remember back in part 1, we talked about these 3 dead rangers the Night's Watch would eventually find near the end of this chapter. This particular vision, or should I say more accurately, the authenticity of this particular vision, is highly significant to Jon Snow's story. Not only does this make Melisandre confident that she is interpreting her visions correctly, it also clears a path for Jon to start listening to Mel in regards to what she sees in her flames. I'm going to go further and state that this path will ultimately lead to Jon Snow's assassination. But before I get to how that's possible, I first want to continue with the chapter, Jon and Melisandre's private conversation.
As they walked beneath the wall, she slipped her arm through his. The priestess did not speak, but she slowed her pace deliberately, and where she walked, the ice began to drip. He will not fail to notice that. Beneath the iron grating of a murder hole, Snow broke the silence, as she had known he would. "What of the other 6? "I have not seen them," Melisandre said. "Will you look?" "Of course, my lord." "We've had a raven from Sir Dennis Mallister at the Shadow Tower. His men have seen fires in the mountains on the far side of the gorge. Wildlings massing, Sir Dennis believes. He thinks they are going to try to force the Bridge of Skulls again." "Some may." Could the skulls in her vision have signified this bridge? Somehow Melisandre did not think so. "If it comes, that attack will be no more than a diversion. I saw towers by the sea submerged beneath a black and bloody tide. That is where the heaviest blow will fall." Eastwatch? Was it? The towers in her fire had been different, but that was off the way with visions. "Yes, Eastwatch, my lord." "When?" She spread her hands. "On the morrow, in a moon's turn, in a year. And it may be that if you act, you may avert what I have seen entirely. Else, what would be the point of visions?"
Okay, so here we see Jon and Mel walking side by side back through the tunnel of the wall. Ice begins to drip with every step she takes, which I take as another sign that fire dwells inside Melisandre. Back in part 2, we briefly toyed with the idea that she might be some reincarnated variant of Nissa Nissa, the wife of Azor Ahai. I believe there is a strong possibility that Jon will kill Melisandre, in turn creating a new Lightbringer, the sword taking in her fire essence. There is some foreshadowing on this topic, and we will discuss that shortly. Next, Jon asks Melisandre about the other missing rangers, following that with asking her to search for them in her flames. It seems that Jon is slowly changing his mind about Melisandre's power. Now, let's talk about the message Jon received from the Shadow Tower. What Denys Mallister mentions in his letter to the Lord Commander is very similar to what Mel saw earlier in her chapter. He thinks that wildlings will try and force the Bridge of Skulls, and I said back in part 1 that the image of skulls that Melisandre viewed might have represented this same bridge. Mel writes all of this off though, and tells the Lord Commander that the heaviest blow will fall upon Eastwatch by the sea. However, we need to keep in mind that before she tells Jon this, she wonders herself if this is actually correct. So now we're getting to the good stuff. Let's head back to the chapter.
"Lord Snow," Melisandre said quietly, "will you come with me to the King's Tower? I have more to share with you." He looked at her face for a long moment with those cold grey eyes of his. His right hand closed, opened, closed again. "As you wish. Ed, take Ghost back to my chambers." Melisandre took that as a sign, and dismissed her own guard as well. They crossed the yard together, just the two of them. The snow fell all around them. She walked as close to Jon Snow as she dared, close enough to feel the mistrust pouring off him, like a black fog. He does not love me, will never love me, but he will make use of me. Well and good. Melisandre had danced the same dance with Stannis Baratheon back in the beginning. In truth, the young Lord Commander and her king had more in common than either of them would ever have been willing to admit. Both men were unbelievers by nature, mistrustful, suspicious. The only gods they truly worshipped were honor and duty. "You have not asked about your sister," Melisandre said, as they climbed the spiral steps of the King's Tower. "I told you, I have no sister. We put aside our kin when we say our words. I cannot help Arya, much as I—" He broke off as they stepped inside her chambers. The wildling was within. He had donned the bone armor she was pleased to see. Jon Snow tensed. "You?" "Lord Snow." The ruby on his wrist glimmered in the morning light. like a dim red star. "What are you doing here?"
"Breaking my fast. You're welcome to share."
"I'll not break bread with you."
"Your loss. The loaf's too warm. Hub can do that much at least. I heard about your rangers. You should have sent me with them."
"So you could betray them to the Weeper?"
"Are we talking about betrayals?" "What was the name of that wilding wife of yours, Snow? Ygritte, wasn't it?"
The wildling turned to Melisandre.
"I will need horses, 6 good ones, and this is nothing I can do alone."
"What is he talking about?" Lord Snow asked her. "Your sister. You cannot help her, but he can." "I think not. You do not know this creature. He'd be more like to rape and murder Arya than to save her. No. If this was what you have seen in your fires, my lady, you must have ashes in your eyes. If he tries to leave Castle Black without my leave, I'll take his head off myself." "He leaves me no choice. So be it. Devon, leave us." Melisandre touched the ruby at her neck and spoke a word. The ruby on the wildling's wrist darkened, and the wisps of light and shadow around him writhed and faded. All at once he was bigger than before, broader in the chest and shoulders, long-legged and lean, his face clean-shaved and wind-burnt. "Mance?"
"Lord Snow."
"She burned you."
"She burned the Lord of Bones."
Jon Snow turned to Melisandre. "What sorcery is this?"
"Call it what you will.
R'hllor is Lord of Light, Jon Snow, and it is given to his servants to weave with it, as others weave with thread."
First, let's talk about what happens when Mel asks Jon to join her in the King's Tower, because this is where the foreshadowing I mentioned earlier comes into play. Melisandre looks at his hand. Think about Jon's reaction to the question right before he agrees to join her. We know the significance of the hand opening and closing. Remember, it was Maester Aemon that told Jon that he must constantly work his burnt hand so as to keep it from clenching up. Also keep in mind that Mel has no idea as to why he does this. I believe this is foreshadowing Melisandre's execution by Jon's own hand. Moving on, it is revealed to both the reader and the Lord Commander that the wildling Rattleshirt was actually the thought-to-be-dead king beyond the wall, Mance Rayder. Mel explains that they chose to spare the false king, burning the Lord of Bones in his place. Using the powers given to her by R'hllor, she was able to glamour the Lord of Bones prior his execution. She tells Jon and Mance that it was easily accomplished, but kept out the part about how badly the ruby around her neck had burned whilst Rattleshirt went up in flames. She was grateful to the Lord Commander when he put an arrow through Rattleshirt's chest, because it wasn't until then that the pain stopped. I have to say, when I first read that Mance was still alive, I was pretty shocked. It also kinda grinds my gears that I missed all of the hints that suggested Rattleshirt was truly Mance. Mel referring to the wildlings as his people, the fact that he knows the inner workings of the Night's Watch, that he's mentioned on numerous occasions that he's climbed the wall 100 times. Oh, and the part when the fake Mance, Rattleshirt, cried out, "No, this is not right. I am not the king." Of course it was Mance the whole time. So, before I get back to what I put forth at the start of this video, that Mel being correct about the heads of the dead Rangers would eventually lead to the assassination of Jon, I want us to head back to A Dance with Dragons and finish listening to the chapter.
"Our false king has a prickly manner," Melisandre told Jon Snow, "but he will not betray you. We hold his son, remember, and he owes you his very life." "Me?" Snow sounded startled.
"Who else, my lord? Only his life's blood could pay for his crimes, your law said. And Stannis Baratheon is not a man to go against the law. But as you said so sagely, the laws of men end at the wall. I told you that the Lord of Light would hear your prayers. You wanted a way to save your little sister and still hold fast to the honor that means so much to you. to the vows you swore before your wooden god." She pointed with a pale finger. "There he stands, Lord Snow, Arya's deliverance, a gift from the Lord of Light, and me."
So the chapter ends with Mel convincing Jon to allow Mance Rayder to head south into the heart of the North to rescue Arya Stark. And with that, we can get back to what I put forth earlier. So I'm sure you want to ask me, how does Mel being right about those 3 dead Rangers lead to Jon Snow's assassination? Let's break it down. First, I already stated that her being correct about those 3 heads is enough to give her the confidence to trust that she is correctly interpreting these visions, as well as giving her an in to Jon Snow. However, this leads to a problem and our second point. Let's think back to the gray girl on the dying horse. She thinks that this is Arya, but we know this is not the case. It's later revealed towards the end of this book that this gray girl on the dying horse was actually Alys Stark fleeing her marriage to her cousin. The entire success of the quest Mel gives to Mance relies on this girl actually being Arya. Now, to get to the next point. Mance and company successfully kidnap who they think to be Arya. Well, actually it was Theon who kidnapped Jane Poole, who was posing as Arya, but anyway, they escape Winterfell. Now, think what happens at the start of Jon's last chapter in A Dance with Dragons. He receives the pink letter. In response, Jon vows to kill Ramsay, asking for men to join him on his march to Winterfell. This causes some of the sworn brothers to become outraged, especially Bowen Marsh, and this act pushes them to go through with the killing of their Lord Commander for the Watch. So by this line of reasoning, I could say that Melisandre is to blame, however indirectly, for Jon Snow being murdered. If this is the case, it would fit nicely with how Martin uses prophecy in his writing. Remember, Mel had previously seen images of Jon being murdered and warned him about it. It seems that she was inadvertently responsible for setting his assassination into motion. This sort of parallels the prophecy pertaining to Queen Cersei. Consider this. The future that Cersei was told by the Woods Witch, is it an unavoidable fate that can't be altered? Or is it that by attempting to change her bleak future, does she clear a path to that very fate? In both Melisandre and the Queen's case, it's quite a conundrum. Back to the topic of the dead Rangers. Mel being correct about finding those Rangers' heads, but not about Arya and possibly the other visions, this proposes an interesting question. If Melisandre is a loyal servant of R'hllor, why would he send her a vision as clear as day in regards to the dead Watchmen, but be painfully cryptic with all the others? Well, it could be that the dead Ranger's vision wasn't sent to her by the Lord of Light in the first place. Could it be it was Bloodraven who showed her this one image? Maybe she was seeing the spikes in real time. Bloodraven using his vast network of werewoods and animals to spy on the Weeper's work, so he could then plant the scene into Melisandre's mind. I don't think it was a coincidence that Bloodraven showed himself while Mel was searching the flames. However, this is a topic for another day. So there we have it, folks. It's been an interesting ride reviewing and discussing this one and only Melisandre P.O.V. I hope you've learned something new by watching this, and that maybe we've gotten a little closer to solving some of these ice and fire mysteries. Thanks for watching. Share, like, and subscribe to stay updated and be the first to watch newly uploaded videos.